It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Keep an eye on taxes and fees.
Yeah, that's a huge one. We talk about it all the time because people the number one thing that gets people to often come into the door to talk with us or talk with any financial advisor for that matter is talking about investment management, right?
Yeah.
And so what I think people are surprised to hear us say is we don't get to control what the markets do. I mean, we can control to some extent how much we participate in the markets, but ultimately, if the markets are going down, we're going to lose money. And if they're going up, we're going to make money. We can't control it. We don't get to control the direction, but there are two pieces that we do get to control.
When I think about this is the way I always put it is when somebody tells me they have 15, 20, 25 years before they retire, I'm like, what are we worried about? Cash, stocks, bonds. I mean, you're going to be investing because you have too long before you retire. So what do we care what's going on in the short term? If we need to focus on what does the future look like, and if the future is this, it's exactly what you just said. Don't worry about the stuff you can't control because all you're doing is worried about something that you are just it's going to bother you and it's going to create stress with the stress that is unreasonable when there's no ability to have an impact on it.
Yep.
What you can impact are these two things we just mentioned, taxes and fees. And in the short term, it's going to be, I think it's going to help you sleep better. And in the long term, when you have that understanding of what you can control and what you can't control, you're going to make better financial decisions. You're going to be more successful. And then I think it also will protect you from what we get to number 3 in a minute. You'll see that just that healthy relationship is going to make you so much better in the long term.
But so you said, Brian, that one of the things that we can control is taxes. And I think, and you know, we used to say this, I'm pretty sure anytime somebody doesn't know who actually said something,
they just say
Benjamin Franklin. So I don't know if it was actually Franklin who said this.
You know, it's funny you said, because I think he probably did say something like this, but it is funny how many Benjamin Franklin quotes we pulled up.
He said a lot of stuff.
You're like,
surely he was
Benjamin Franklin. The dude was obviously, we already know he was a genius, but he should have written down more stuff that he said, obviously.
So essentially what he said was,
him and Shakespeare.
or what someone said was, there are only two things that are certain, death and taxes. But what you're saying is that taxes are actually something that we can't control. So how do you reconcile those two ideas?
Now, look, I'm not saying we're Al Capone here because tax evasion will end you in Alcatraz, just like Al Capone. Our concern is, but what is actually encouraged is tax minimization. You can avoid taxes legally by the way you structure your portfolio. So you got to make sure that you're taking advantage of that. And one of the biggest things we tell you, in the beginning when you're starting out, you don't even really have to necessarily focus on the tax part because you can do a target retirement fund.
That's right.
But we've told you once you get your assets over $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, you're going to need to really start paying attention to tax location.
That's right.
And what I mean by tax location is that if you have a tax deferred account like a 401k, that's where you're going to put your bonds in because they generate ordinary income, and nobody wants to pay ordinary income tax rates because they're their highest income tax rates. So let's get those in those tax deferred 401ks and 403bs. When we have dividend paying stocks, it's something that we want to have easy access to. That's your liquidity, and you just want to do that after tax type holdings.
Or something that spits off like qualified capital gain distributions.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Things that you could get some type of tax benefit of lower tax rate, capital gains, dividends, those things are all paid at lower tax rates. Take advantage of that. And then things you think are going to be hyper growth motivated that are going to allow you to stick it to the man legally.
Yep.
You want to put those in your Roth, your tax-free accounts. That's what we're talking about when we say tax location. So a plan can be integrated like a nice complex jigsaw puzzle that'll work perfectly for a client.
So what we just said was, if you didn't pay attention, that was some pretty valuable insight. I mean, I like to think that everything we say is pretty valuable. That was pretty important. Let me say it a little bit differently. If you're someone out there and the way that you're managing your portfolio is you want to be a 60-40 mix. And so in your 401k, you're 60-40, and then in your brokerage account, you're 60-40, and then your Roth IRA, you're 60-40. If that's something that's resonating with you in terms of how you're managing your portfolio, there's a chance you're not managing it in the most tax efficient way possible.
Yeah. I mean, and think about it. If you could save yourself $1,000, $2,000 a year in taxes, That's money that
That's
might be
substantial.
working in your army of dollar bills. So
That's
let's maximize these opportunities. The second component of avoiding or trying to minimize taxes and fees is that component of fees.
Yep.
Let's kind of talk about that. In the first one, transaction fees.
Yeah.
Now, when I say this one, because realize when I say fees, I don't think you can get rid of all fees.
No, you certainly can't, because there is no free lunch, right? I think Benjamin
it's
Franklin
Fidelity,
said that.
Fidelity Freedom Fund. I mean, the Fidelity Zero funds
Sure.
are actually free, but at the end of the day, there are things that are going to have a transaction fee.
Yep.
And I want you to minimize, and a lot of times you can do no load mutual funds. You can do, if you buy like from Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, they give you access to their funds without fees.
Yeah, and another, if transaction fees is one of the things you're trying to cut, there's a huge way to do that. You just have to know the custodian you're with. A lot of them, if you sign up for like online statements where you normally might pay, $9.95 to trade a stock or an ETF, you do online statements, it might be like $4.95 or something.
Or pool
like that.
your assets.
Yep.
Because it's crazy to have $250 at one custodian, another $250, because they might have a break point at $500,000
That's right.
or $1 million, where once you have that level of assets with them, they just give you stuff for free.
That's right.
So it's the same reason like your homeowner's insurance. If you put your car and your house at the same place, they give you a deal.
Yep.
It's kind of the same way with where your custodians are. And transaction fees, and this is what I was kind of alluding to, is that we even pay them every now and then
right.
to get access to some funds we like. But what we do is we just try to make sure that we buy enough of the fund so that the transaction fee is such a minuscule
right.
portion of it that it doesn't hurt you. What you don't want to get into, because I see people, I used to deal with this when I was working actually on the fee side. I was actually on the commission side of when I first started managing money, is that people would have set up $100 a month or $250 a month. Right. Dollar cost averaging strategy, and then have a transaction charge every month to buy. That's horrible. I'd rather them pull those assets together and have one much lower transaction fee, because the quantity typically didn't matter. It was just they were going to charge you the same transaction fee, whether it was $250 or whether it was $100,000.
And you sort of alluded to this. If you are paying a transaction fee for some sort of investment you purchase, just make sure you understand why. Some funds you might pay a transaction fee to get a lower internal expense. I mean, that's most often the case.
And that could be a better deal.
Exactly. You just have to understand why you're paying it. Why are you paying it? Is it reasonable? And then is it justified based on what your strategy is?
And that works and I'm skipping around a little bit because we have internal expenses on here. Mutual funds, anybody who's buying ETFs, mutual funds, those things have what's called internal expenses. This is the cost of keeping the doors open for all the compliance costs, sending out the paper that all the attorneys require, and everything else that's going on, the taxes, the regulatory stuff. So there's going to be an internal expense. And you just want to make sure that the transaction fee, the internal expenses, you're taking those two in as a whole. Because, Bo, you're exactly right. We have dealt with funds that were NTF, non-transaction fee funds, but you find out they have an internal expense of 0.5%.
Yep.
And you're like, well, okay, that's all right. I don't have to pay a transaction fee. But then you find out they have an institutional version that you have access to because you're buying enough shares of. But it might have a transaction fee of $25 every time you buy it. You've got to balance which one is it's a simple math calculation is what it is. But pay attention to this, because there is a way to minimize the fees. You just kind of have to squeeze it the right way and make sure you're buying the right version of the investment you want. And then the last thing, and everybody knows this, commissions.
Oh, yeah.
I would like for you, if you can at all possible, avoid commissions. If you work with a commission person, first of all, I'd ask you, if you find out you're with a commission person, are you buying index funds? Mm-hmm. You've heard us do so many shows on where the industry is going is people are buying index funds. I mean, instead of trying to beat the market, just buy the market.
That's it.
So the first thing, if I see somebody has commissions, I'm like, are they even able to buy into one of the primary investments that I want people in these days? And then the second thing is if they are selling something with commissions, find out why. Is there a reason for why we're doing this versus a no load or something that would give me better access like an index fund?
That's actually great advice. And this is just a brief aside. If you are ever working with any sort of financial advisor, a great question I always ask is why? Why do you do it this way? Why do you feel this makes the most sense? Why do you feel that this is the appropriate structure? You want to make sure they have a really good answer for that because it matters.
Yep.